Hello everyone, welcome to the favorite part of your day, which is you get to find out what happened in the Liren and Ian Nepomniatchi game. Ian had the white pieces this game, and he went with d4 for the start. And this was already kind of weird, because chess players often, even though at that pro level they could play multiple openings with proficiency, they generally choose one opening and then stick with it for their most competitive games. And Ian is very much well known as a e4 player. There was an infographic that was floating around around this time last year where they were showing each of the top 20 players in the world and like a breakdown of their opening. And like say 80% go with d4 or 30% go with c4 and kind of stuff like that, just to see where the line kind of stood. And while most players were e4 players, Ian was one of the most heavily using e4 player. So to bust out d4 in a world championship match, even though it's pretty normal move, just because it was him that played it was a little bit weird. But we get knight to f6. If he would go bishop g5, we would have the Trompowsky, which is extremely rare, but one of my favorite openings, which of course we don't see. We just see standard stuff right here. Knight to c3. He offers the pawn trade. Queen's gambit accepted. He's going to take the pawn. We're going to see bishop to g5 now, so it's a similar structure. And normally you like getting like a pawn on e3, getting your knight out to f3, bishop on either d3 or e2, whichever is more comfortable. And then you typically can choose which side you castle. You could actually still go both. And the London also has a similar setup, except normally the bishop would be here on f4. But same stuff. So e3, we get h6, and here you offer, the knight trade, and black is left with the choice of recapturing with the queen, or, recapturing with the pawn. But here he chose just not to take. We're going to have the bishop defending it. Bishop d3. You want to try to get this move out if your opponent doesn't play bishop f5 first. Since he doesn't, then this is a pretty safe bet to make. We're going to see castles. Queen to c2, just creating this battery against the king. It obviously doesn't amount to anything right now, just because the knight's there and because the king has an escape square, but good positionally to have that threat. Rook's going to come to e8, put itself with the king, so we're probably going to see either knight e2 or knight f3. We're going to see e2, probably just protecting against this. Knight goes d7. We see a kingside castle, and we see a5. So here you probably just either react with a4 or a3 yourself. I'm assuming he's going to try to put things on dark squares just because he has this light square bishop that he wants to be able to maneuver through all of his pieces, like I talked about in a previous video. Yes, he also has his dark square bishop, but when it's on this diagonal, normally you're not going to try to save it that badly. Normally you're just going to exchange it, when the time occurs. That's not going to cost you a lot of tempo to do so. So we're going to see a3. Knight to h5, so yeah. Now that it isn't really bad for him to trade a bishop for a bishop, he's going to go ahead and do so. We're going to see rook a to e1. Which kind of gives me the idea that maybe he's trying to play for f4. And I was still watching this game live at the time, and, before I accidentally fell asleep. But they were saying that the queen might come here to g5 just to bait this move f4, and that then he'll either return to d8 or e7. And the idea is that now this e3 pawn is going to be very much backwards and a weakness that could be targeted. But we just see some maneuvering in this game instead. So we see knight to f8. The idea is to, of course, free up the bishop, get this knight onto a better square. We see knight to c1. And same thing, there's a nice little outpost that could be forming here. There's also a threat that could be made against a5. Even though it doesn't amount to anything right now, it can leave the a8 rook to kind of play defense as opposed to offense. We see knight come to f6 now, back to its original home, now that the bishops were traded off. We see f3, so he's even preparing like a e4 push here, where he could get a strong attack going with these 2 pawns with rooks behind him. We have the knight coming to e6, just to put pressure on this if he ever gets the idea of playing e4, so he defends it indirectly. Knight comes to e2. Then we have c5 played. The idea is that you want to try to trade these off so that this attack is not nearly as strong. Also, if you don't react to it, then you could just start, taking. And then you have an individual pawn, or you take with a knight, and you still get an individual pawn. The only thing is right now that's not possible because the queen is in line with the rook, and obviously you need the queen to get out of the way before you do that. Bishop is going to attack the rook. Rook's going to sidestep it. He understands that the pressure is really on this square. We're going to see captures, and then queen's going to go to d2. That positional move is a little bit above my head because I thought that would be kind of scary with the rook being there. Not to mention I don't see what he's actually attacking or defending. Okay, I guess that's not over my head. I just missed this. The e3 was hanging. I guess he'd rather move the queen than move the knight to g3, for example. Maybe he's waiting for the right spot to move this knight. Bishop coming to d7. I don't think you want to trade here as well. I think he's going to go back to like d3, but let's see. He does choose to trade. I guess maybe one reason he chose to trade is that if the rook takes and he looks to double up, you can kind of just blockade this d4 square, and then those rooks will be a little bit silly and out of place. And otherwise you have to do it with a knight, which I don't think the knight wants to be on d7 permanently. Maybe that was part of the thought process into it. So now we get knight to d4. And we get knight to b6. I guess the reason here that you're not so much worried about the isolated pawn is because he doesn't have enough pieces to threaten it. So say, for example, that he had a dark square bishop. I mean Ding Liren. Say Ding Liren has a dark square bishop and you only have a light square bishop. Then yeah, mathematically you're always going to have more pieces that could attack that piece than pieces that could defend that piece. So you really don't want to double up there. However, in a position like this, it's not too bad if you were to want to do so. Also, the way that this would kind of end up, trading out, your rook would be on this square in that instance. We get knight coming to c4. So these 3 pawns are under attack right now, so I'm assuming we're going to see like a queen to e2 to defend everything. Okay, so same thing. I mean, it still defends those 3 squares, and now you're also protecting against that diagonal. Rook comes to c5. Knight attacks the queen. I mean, I guess there aren't a whole lot of home squares for this queen here, so he is kind of forced to go back a little bit. Maybe d6, or if he wants to flip the board, maybe he'll go to e7 and look to come out the other side. Okay, so we chose e7. We have the other f-rook coming to e1 now. Queen coming over to f6. Yeah, I guess just putting more pressure on these 2 squares so that if this knight ever leaves, then it's kind of in trouble. Which he does do, but he still has enough protection for the time being. I wonder if he'll try kicking the knight with maybe like a knight c7 or something. Because I don't think it would be bad to have double pawns on this this row right here, because there's no pawns impeding it. Okay. Oh, but he chose not to trade. Looks like the game is ending here shortly. I wonder if we had like a repetition or something. Knight e6. Okay, he goes back. Yeah, and it looks like they don't want to, they don't want to press forward. Which I don't think one side is necessarily winning. The engine definitely shows that it's pretty equal. If I were playing in this game, I'd probably prefer to be white, just because I don't have an isolated pawn here. But again, like I was saying earlier, isolated pawns aren't as bad when you don't have a way to have it taken away from you, which you don't in this game. I mean, sure, there's chances, you know, if you put your knight on c5 and then maybe you maneuver this knight around a little bit. I don't know how you would do so. Maybe like there to attack it as well. And then the whole time that's happening, maybe you could somehow blockade it with a rook. Excuse me. But I do understand that he has a weakness right here in e3. He can't really push that right now. He can, but he would just be trading rooks. Because he would come down here. So I get why they agreed to a draw. They also understand the position a lot better than me, but it looks like your different opportunities that you have of grabbing these weak squares, I mean, you have to worry about your own weak squares in the process. So it looks like neither were really ready to commit to their assault. But that is all for this video. That was game number 3. I don't know if they have a break tomorrow or not. I don't believe that they do. So I think that we'll have another game tomorrow morning. But thank you for watching the game 3 recap, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.